you know Jess at all, you'll know that last line was wrong. It's not "you'll all be all right." It's "it'll be fine," which is what Jess says to everything. Jess Rogers is, oh yeah, Susan just pointed to me. I forgot something again. I forgot this last week, and you are the best ever. Susan, would you come forward, please? Kyle, would you come forward, please? Guess whose birthday it was last week? This guy right here. Yeah. And we want to show you how much we love you with some gifts and the best gift bag I've ever seen in my, I don't think the giraffe can hip hop though, but it might have to. Happy birthday, man. We love you. We're so thankful for you. I like how you did that, Susan. She just made eye contact with me and she was like, forgot again. Anyway, Jess, come on up. Jess is married to Kyle. Jess is also our next gen children's director. She's the master of all things fun. She makes me laugh like nobody else, and she brings me to tears like nobody else. So Jess, thank you for being willing to do this. I know you are terrified, but it's gonna be all right. It'll be fine.
Okay, I have a slideshow, so you're not just looking at me. Okay. Since I found out I'd be sharing my testimony, okay, first of all, I'm very nervous. This is crippling for me. So,
put the slides up already.
Please put the slide up. I've had a specific SNL skit playing in my mind since I've said that I would do this. If you've seen this, this is Al Franken. He plays a guy named Stuart Smalley, and he does daily affirmations with different celebrities. So he did it with Macaulay Culkin and Michael Jordan and a whole bunch of them. But at the end of all of it, he says, I'm good enough, I am smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And that has been what I've told myself this whole time because I know you guys like me. So, which you'd think would help a lot more, but I'm still freaking out. So. Okay, it's a big deal for me to get up here and do this. I've had a real physical knot in my stomach all week prepping for this day. Physical, like my stomach has hurt all week. I'm going to do my best to speak slowly and clearly throughout all of this, but just a heads up, when I'm nervous, I talk very quickly, and I talk very quickly when I'm not nervous. So then I run out of breath, I have to stop and catch my breath, and it sounds like I'm gonna cry, or I just cry, so bear with me. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jess Rogers. I'm the Next Gen Director here at Midway Auburn, which means I get to hang out with the kids and youth and plan lots of fun events. It is truly an honor to get to call that my job. When Alyssa approached me about doing my testimony, I laughed, which isn't too surprising because I laugh at everything. It's my response to 85% of things in my life, but I especially tend to laugh when I'm nervous. Talking in front of anyone over the age of 18 has never been anywhere near close to my comfort zone, but I am good enough, I am strong enough, and you guys like me. Okay, you can go to the second slide. I'm the firstborn child of Dan and Connie Buck. My parents are amazing. They have been married for 40 years and taught us all a lot about love, life, and how to have fun. My dad is a carpenter and a true artist, and my mom is a bus driver. Thank you. I was trying not to be gross. Thanks. Okay. And my mom is a bus driver and has cleaned so many houses when we were younger so that she could stay home with us. I'm very proud to be their daughter. I have two brothers. Brandon is a flight attendant and will be 30 this week. And Jordan is a mechanic and he'll be 21 in May, and he's my baby. I have a 24-year-old sister named Elizabeth who's here. She is the coolest bar manager in America and also happens to be my best friend. My family is fun and loud and loving, and we try our best to get together once a week to have dinner, laugh, and play poker. I know how lucky I am to have a family that is supportive and sweet and actually enjoys hanging out together. They are truly one of my biggest blessings. We grew up not far from here in Loganville, Georgia, where we went to a little Baptist church on Main Street. We went there for several years until they built a new campus and we transferred there. My mom volunteered in the children's department, and my best friend's dad was the children's pastor, so we found ourselves at church a lot. VBS, Halloween, Christmas parades, camps, Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, it truly felt like we were always there. Each event had a similar layout. We'd play some games, sing some songs, learn some stories, and be hit with a tiny poof of guilt. Not a lot of guilt. We weren't constantly being told that we would go to hell or anything, just occasionally. Usually the guilt was given in different forms, things like make sure you listen to only Christian music or God is going to know, throw away your Harry Potter books right now, why would you read those? Or my favorite, and this is weird, make sure that when you hug people, only hug them with one arm so the mountains don't touch the plains. That is a weird thing to tell children. But it was a thing we were told. I can remember sitting around the fire at kids' camp crying out that I needed God to be my umbrella. While I can't recall the actual words that were said leading up to that moment, I can definitely remember the feeling I felt when I prayed those words. I cried because I felt guilty. It wasn't necessarily this happy or exciting moment for me, more of a I have to do this right now or I'm going to be in trouble. Shortly after camp, I came home and was baptized. This is actually the second time I was baptized since my parents had done it when I was a baby. I was told, and when I joined the church, I was scared that I was going to have to be baptized again, and I specifically asked Alyssa if I had to be baptized because I was like, I'm not doing that, because I've actually been baptized 3 times, so anyways, but we'll get there. I was told it was the next step in my faith, and so I did it. It was a happy day for me. I knew Jesus loved me, and everyone was excited for me, and my family was there to celebrate. From there, it was a constant list of things I had to do to make sure I was living my faith and growing. I remember reading the New Testament in a year, which in that time in life I was not a fan of reading, especially when I was told it was something I had to do. So for me, that was something I hated every second of. I also remember being given a stack of cards to hand out to my friends at school, which I didn't do and felt incredibly guilty about. Just weird checklist kind of things to get me through the year until it was time for our next big life-changing event. Middle school was even worse. I remember one event where someone built an actual coffin for us to throw all our worldly things into and burn, which is weird. Kids were throwing hundreds of dollars worth of CDs, books, movies, and clothing into a fire as they sobbed and repented. Luckily for me, my family really didn't have the money for CDs or movies or anything like that, so I had nothing to throw into the fire, but I remember sitting there looking and just being very uncomfortable. I remember the specific feeling that washed over me every time these kinds of situations arrived. It was so familiar that I began to call it that Jesus feeling, just because that must just be the feeling you get when God's trying to save you. The first time I can truly remember that experiencing that feeling was when I was calling out, asking Jesus to be my umbrella. Now that I'm a grown-up, I still feel this feeling on occasion, but I now know it as its actual name, anxiety. The feeling I kept feeling wasn't God trying to talk to me or Jesus trying to save me from my sins. It was the anxiety that came with being told everything you did had to line up perfectly with what the church told me, or else I was definitely going to disappoint God. It was such a wild way to shape my young faith. I can remember coming home from camp and talking to my mom about some of the things we learned. Sorry. And her saying, well, God also has a lot of patience and grace. And so sometimes it takes us time to learn what is right, and that's okay. I'm so thankful for this now because she was always a voice of reason that snapped me back from these strange, narrow-minded ways of thinking. Slide 3. Not all of my young church experiences were bad. Once I got into high school, I found a pretty solid group of friends that kept me out of trouble. We spent a lot of time together, and it was really, really fun, and honestly kept me going to church. I can't remember much of what was taught throughout these years, but I can remember the relationships and love I felt from friends and adults who poured into me. There was one couple specifically who treated us like their own kids. Their names were Jimmy and Selita. We crashed at their house every weekend, showing up at all hours, and they were always happy to see us. Now that I'm a grown-up and work with teenagers, I know what a sacrifice that is, because if you guys showed up at my house at 8 o'clock at night, I would be like, what are you doing? You could come in, but it would be weird. There was still a lot of different things going on at church, but I always had my friends there, so nothing really bothered me too much. While I don't remember there being a lot of guilt in high school, I do remember there being a lot of judgment. Judgment if you didn't act a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way, or if you just made decisions like a teenager. If you did something that older people didn't like, you would be judged, and they would let you know it. I can remember one time I walked into a church event, and 2 of my personal adult Sunday school teachers were standing there talking about how many piercings I had. No way, my daughter would ever walk around like that. That's trashy. When they saw me standing there, they both got quiet, and of course I got nervous and laughed and left the room. But what a blow. To walk into a church event and hear 2 of your very own Sunday school teachers talking about you in disgust is a very strange thing to happen. And I was a good kid, so it hurt, but I remember thinking, it doesn't matter, it'll be fine, whatever, and shaking it off. There were several other instances like that throughout high school, but I always had my friends to fall back on and keep me steady. Plus, I really have always been super easygoing and oblivious to most things. So at that point in my life, I was very positive, and it just didn't get me down. I kept going to church every Sunday and all the events I could. I can't quite remember what happened that led up to this, but I was baptized again when I was in high school. I remember sitting in Bible study being told that if you were baptized before you were actually saved, it might not really count. This sent me drowning in that Jesus feeling, which was anxiety. By this point, I had developed the lovely fear I have now in standing in front of others, so the idea of getting in front of an entire church to let everyone know that the last time I stood up here was a joke was terrifying to me. But I did it. I can so vividly remember the night before that Sunday, sitting in my bed crying because I was scared I wasn't doing the right thing. Jesus was definitely with me, though, because I felt anxious. But I did it. I found rest in the fact that I would definitely never have to do it again. I also served in church a lot. I started teaching first grade Sunday school when I was a sophomore in high school, and I loved it every second of it. I always knew when I grew up I wanted to work with kids, and even though I had been volunteering in nursery and children's church for years, this was the first time I truly got to teach a group of kiddos by myself. I taught every Sunday and really knew that it was something important and that would always be a part of my life. At the end of my junior year of high school, my dad was laid off work. I can remember how devastating that was for both my parents. We never had a ton of money, but we were always comfortable and okay, and this was a wild new chapter. I can remember my mom picking me up from school every day crying because she was scared, and my dad being home feeling totally lost without a job. We had just moved for the first time in my life. I was about to be a senior in high school, and that wasn't cheap, and my youngest brother was about to start kindergarten. That's crazy. Anyways, that was the year my mom got a job driving a school bus, and eventually my dad got hired at a new cabinet shop. I was working as a telemarketer, and I remember thinking, which is a funny job for a 15-year-old, how important it was to always keep a job. It wasn't ever an option in my brain to quit. I had never known either of my parents to quit a job, which is still true to this day, and they instilled in their kids a great work ethic, and I'm super thankful for that. I worked as a telemarketer for 3 years. I started at 15 and kept it until the summer of my senior year. I also did a lot of babysitting during that time. My friends had all left for college, and I was very sad, so I liked to stay busy. Going away to college wasn't in my cards, so I enrolled in a community college and got a job at Sonic so I could skate. The first year was rough for me. All my friends had left. They were at college experiencing so many new things, and I was still at home. I loved my family, so that wasn't the problem. I just missed my friends a lot. I did have one of my closest friends stay home too, and we were able to attend the same local college together. That was a lifesaver for me. We also continued to go to the same church together, but I started noticing something super weird happening. I just wasn't fitting in. I'd go to events with people I'd known most of my life, including my best friend, and would end up alone and awkward, which was totally new territory for me. I've never had an issue hanging out with people or meeting new friends, but this was a different, weird energy. I tried to keep going to church throughout my freshman year at college, but it became super hard. I didn't feel welcomed, and I felt sad anytime I'd go. I tried to talk to my best friend about it, who was still going to church with me at the time, and she told me that it was a personal problem that I needed to get right with God. A few months later, I actually met up with her at the Ranch, which is the local Mexican restaurant in our town, for her birthday. She proceeded to break up with me right there in the middle of the ranch. She told me I was going in a different direction than her. It's crazy because this was 15 years ago and it still hurts, but that I was going in a different direction than her, and they were all up here and I was way down here. Which is a weird thing to be told over shredded chicken nachos. I finally asked her what she meant in plain words, and she told me that I was not up to her spiritual level and that I needed to figure out while she went her own way. Okay. I was devastated. This is so weird. Sorry, guys. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, you guys like me. Okay. Thanks. I was devastated. I held in my tears as I paid for her birthday lunch and then walked to the guard to give her the present that I had because I had no shame, told her goodbye, got in my car, and sobbed. I had never had a real breakup before and still haven't to this day. I've always been very guarded with my heart, especially when it came to dating, so I never expected my best friend to do that to me. It was truly awful, and the cherry on top was the fact that she was a vital member of our church. She was one of the main leaders in our praise band. Everyone loved her, and I couldn't possibly go back there and feel that kind of hurt all over again, so I didn't. One day, right before my freshman year started, I got a call from a random lady asking me to babysit her kids. Her name was Kelly Smith. She told me she got my number from another mom she knew randomly at her school, and that I came highly recommended. I met with the family and instantly fell in love. I started babysitting for them full time and loved every second of it. I went on vacation with them, visited grandparents in Florida with them, and eventually started going to church with them. It was a weird age for a church in a town where I was nowhere near a college, so there was nobody my age at church. But one night, Kelly asked me about a college event that their church was hosting. I went to it, which in hindsight is the craziest thing for me to have done by myself, because I don't do things like this and meet new people. But I loved it. I kept going back and made a lot of new friends. After a few months, I started volunteering with the youth. This was my first experience working with anyone over the age of 10, so there was a bit of a learning curve, but I loved it. I poured all my extra energy into this group of kids, and then I had a lot of energy. I started leading a 9th through 10th grade small group, and I loved and learned so much during my time with them. I was so happy, and my faith was growing, and it felt like I belonged again. Although they continued to play the role of my second family to this day, I only worked with the Smiths for 2 more years until I got a job at a private Christian school in Loganville. A friend of mine from high school worked there, and they were looking for someone to lead their 2-year-old class. I jumped at the opportunity and was so excited. I was going to school to become a teacher, and it just felt like the first little taste of that in the real world, so I thought. I worked in the 2-year-old room for about 4 months, then was promoted to the pre-K art teacher mid-year. I stayed for 3 years. While I absolutely loved many aspects of that job, the older I got, the more my eyes began to open to the craziness that was happening around me. The kids were not being treated well. I actually saw a teacher stomp on the foot of one of the kids because he stomped on hers first. He was 3, and it was one of the most shocking things I had ever seen in my 20 years of living. I reported it to my boss, and she told me she would handle it. I'm not sure how she did or what she did, but after that day, I really kept my eyes open to what was going on around me. I'd become very close with the girl who taught next to me, and I remember talking with her about it and deciding something had to change or we needed to leave. Now, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was a really, really good employee. I taught art and bought all the supplies with the exception of paper and 1 gallon each of blue, red, and yellow paint. I never complained because I didn't know any better. I was making pennies and spending most of it on art supplies or Christmas gifts for my 60 kids. I still managed to save because that was important, but I never had any extra money because I was always doing something for the school. My kids loved me, their parents loved me. I had morphed into not only the art teacher, but I was also the drama, reading, and spelling teacher. I had even written, directed, and provided all the props and costumes for 2 plays, which is very far out of my comfort zone, clearly. And my salary never changed, and I wasn't clued in enough to think it should. I did this because I loved my job. So knowing all of this, I figured that when I went to talk to my boss about some of the things I was experiencing, it would go okay. I thought I would be heard and it would be appreciated. Boy, was I wrong. She immediately attacked my faith in not only the school, but in God, which is a wild thing coming from your boss. I knew my faith was solid. I'd started to relearn what it meant to follow Jesus and love others. God spoke to me in a lot of ways, often through nature, the people around me. So when she attacked that part of my life, I knew she was wrong. She told me I needed to surround myself with better people, and sometimes love was tough. So it shouldn't be a question of the way some of the teachers handled, so I shouldn't question the way some of the teachers handled situations. I knew right then I had to get out. There were so many other horrible things I was experiencing during this time, but I won't go into that. It was just a very dark, sad, and heavy time for me. This was in March, which meant I had 2 more months to go because I didn't think I could quit a job. I remember praying to God that he would help me do that and to leave with grace. My mom would come by and bring me treats on really rough days, and so would my sweet Smith family, the ones I babysat for, because they knew how hard this time was for me. However, eventually I made it. The last day of school came. I was free, but I was jobless, and that had never happened to me before. By this point, I was 22-ish and living on my own with my best friend who moved back home after college. We rented a small basement apartment, and we had so much fun. I babysat a few kids for a while, which allowed me to pay my bills, but that was about it. One day, I got a call from my sweet friend who had also left the private school at the same time. She was working for Rockdale County in a public school. She told me the teacher next door to her needed a kindergarten professional and that I should apply, paraprofessional, and I should apply. So I did, and thus began my public school journey. I worked in Rockdale County for 8 years. I started as a kindergarten para, moved to a pre-K para, changed schools, and got a job in the office as a secretary registrar. I loved my secretary work, greeting the families and kiddos and helping the school flow well, but I was not made to be a registrar. I stuck with it for 2 years, but missed the kids and wanted to go be a para again, so I went back to the classroom as a kindergarten para. I loved my job and my time with Rockdale County. I met one of my best friends there, and we learned so much working in that community. Working as a para pays nothing. So during those years, I always had several jobs. The most I ever had at one time was 6. I taught, tutored, worked for the after-school program, typed depositions, worked as a pool monitor, Ubered, and also did a dog walking app. I was never home. I would wake up, go to school, work at my school, do my after-school shift, drive to the kids' house to tutor, run home and change, and go to the pool until 11:30 or midnight. I did this every day until the pool closed, and then I start Ubering. On the weekends, I Ubered and typed depositions, which is a terrible job for somebody who can't hear. But I still managed to have fun with my friends and visit my family, but it was a wild time. During my time in Rockdale, I moved several times. Our other best friend moved in with us, and we decided to move to Atlanta. The city was never on my list of things I wanted, but my friends were very excited about it, and I loved them, so I thought, how bad could it be? And the answer is very bad. They were very concerned about being ITP, which means inside the perimeter, so we could meet boys and go out. Well, when you have 6 jobs to pay to live inside the perimeter, you don't have time to meet boys and go out. But we were together, and it was going to be fine. Moving to Atlanta is incredibly expensive. I really picked up on my Uber driving. I'd go to work, come home for a quick nap, then drive until 1 or 2 a.m. It worked well because I really like to stay busy, and I needed the money, but there was 0 time left for going out and meeting boys. Since I worked at school where everyone was either married or older, I decided to try online dating. I picked one, made my profile, and went for it, and it was the worst. Meeting someone based solely off looks and a handful of witty discussion questions is rough. I was not good at it. I'm a super private person. I don't share a lot with anyone, especially when it came to my dating life. I didn't call my parents to keep them updated in the process, but I will say, one time, I was trying to vet a guy I was going to meet up with the next day. I was looking him up on Facebook and accidentally tagged my mother in his profile picture. It was mortifying. Not only did I send my mom a notification, who I did not share things with, to say, hey, here's some random man's profile picture, but I also sent him a notification saying, hey, Jess Buck, the girl you're meeting for coffee tomorrow, tagged her mother in your profile picture. I freaked out, untagged him, sent him a message explaining my predicament and how truly funny it really was, and told him I would no longer be meeting that date, and he agreed. So like I said, I just wasn't good at it. I never felt like meeting people after working a 10-hour day and driving 3 hours round trip to school, because Rockdale is not close to where I lived in Atlanta. I didn't want to make small talk. I just didn't want to do any of it. Until this handsome man from Athens commented on my picture of me at Red Rocks. He was sweet and funny and non-threatening, and it was so easy to talk to him, and we talked a lot. We talked every day. We talked every day for several weeks. At this point in time, I had been bullied into taking another job. A woman I worked with gave my number to her sister, who worked at the Renaissance Festival. Yes, that Renaissance Festival. She was a hair braider and desperately wanted me to come work for her. I actually told her no 3 times, which for me, I don't say no, so that's a big deal. And she wore me down, and I said yes. It ran from April to June, and it was every single weekend on the other side of the airport, which is about an hour's drive from my apartment. It was a whole new thing that I did not enjoy, but I did need the money, and it was a funny story, so I sucked it up, put on my long skirt, tied up my corset, pinned flowers in my hair, and braided for 10 hours straight. At this point, I hadn't been able to find a new church in Atlanta, so I didn't have an excuse not to work on Sundays, so I was working 7 days a week. Looking back at it now, I was very depressed during this time. I moved to Atlanta with a happy, what could go wrong, maybe a little bit too positive attitude towards life, and Atlanta took a little bit of that from me. And that move is one of the only things in life that I look back at with regret. In case you haven't figured it out yet, the handsome man I met online was Kyle. Yeah, that'd be weird. We have been talking for a while now, and we still hadn't had the chance to meet. I was working too much, and I didn't want to tell the man who very clearly had never been to the Renaissance Festival based off his profile that I was spending my weekends in a costume yelling huzzah to the tipper. I knew he worked at a church and loved his family very much, and I was very excited to meet him, so we made it happen, and obviously the rest is history. Kyle was truly the only person I ever met online that didn't feel like work. I lit up at the idea of getting to see him each week, and I loved every second I got to spend with him. He was kind and funny and opened the door for me, which he still does to this day because he's a total stud. He even accepted the hair braiding when I finally fessed up to it several weeks later. Our biggest hiccup was that he lived in Athens and I lived in Atlanta, which on a good day was about an hour and a half drive. He spent most of the time coming to me, which was a foreign concept in the world of online dating. He was the only boy who ever even offered to come, and he was excited to do it. It took both of us a long time to introduce each other to our people. My dad swears to this day we were dating for 2 years before he got to meet Kyle. In reality, it was about 8 months. I didn't meet Kyle's parents for a little longer, but I do remember he invited me to church before any of that. He told me all about Midway and the wonderful people who went there. He specifically talked about Eileen, the intense older lady he had been best friends with for years. The idea of Eileen terrified me. I was not raised around my grandparents. My dad's mom died when he was 14, and his dad died when I was 9, and they lived in Michigan, so I didn't see him often. My mom's mom was around, but we did not have a healthy relationship with her. And we laugh when we're uncomfortable, as my mom is doing now. And her dad died when I was 4. She was verbally and mentally abusive and honestly shaped the way I viewed anybody over the age of 70 for most of my life. Anytime I was around an older person, I was constantly waiting for them to call me stupid or ugly or point out how badly I looked in my jeans or just whatever they could to cut me down. That's how my grandmother was my whole life, so I truly didn't know any better. So again, Eileen terrified me. The first time I came to church, Kyle left me to go sing, and I was sitting over there, alone with Eileen. I knew she had once hit people with sticks during choir practice, so I knew she wasn't someone to mess with. I spent the whole service anticipating what she would say to me about my outfit or my hair, and instead she was kind and gentle to me. She invited us to her house for dinner with Ann and Joe Mons, and Guy and Vicki Davis. And again, everyone was so kind and generous, and I slowly started to relax. When Eileen found out I knew how to braid hair, she asked me to teach her so she could braid her granddaughter's hair. I brought my little practice head, who I had named Rennie, over to her house, and we would braid and talk for hours. We became real friends. I was still very scared of her, mostly because she was Eileen and you never knew what she'd say. But she caused the first little chip to loosen off the ice around my heart. Midway melted the rest. Yeah. I was welcomed into the church with open arms. I loved being Kyle's girlfriend, and finally had a church where I was able to grow and connect on some level, something I had been missing for many years. Fast forward about 2 years and COVID hit. I had finally moved closer to Kyle, and I was living in Athens. I had a para job in Clark County, and it was very hard. I knew I couldn't stay there another year, so I started praying about what my next step would be. It scared me to think about finding a job outside of the school system. My whole life, I've worked with kids. Who would I be if I didn't do that? So I prayed and prayed, and I felt like God was telling me I needed to quit my Clark County job altogether, which totally freaked me out. At the time, I was also cleaning houses and had begun a little baking business, so I could manage to pay my bills without my school job, but it felt weird of letting go of something I'd always done. I asked God to make it abundantly clear what my next step would be. At this point in the pandemic, church looked different too. I remember sitting in the fellowship hall feeling sad, watching Benjamin and the Holloway girls sit with their parents thinking, those poor kiddos are hating this. There has to be a safe way for these kids to learn and have fun together. The funny thing was I was still just Kyle's girlfriend. No one really knew much about me, so I couldn't just swoop in and demand to help the children. I remember praying to God, asking for a clear sign in what direction I needed to go. I talked to Kyle about it, and he was praying too. And he encouraged me to just be patient and see what God had to say. I wanted to jump in and save the kiddos from boredom, but that wasn't quite the right time. A few weeks later, we got a new preacher. Her name was Alyssa. On one Sunday, she approached me about taking over the children's department. It was a dream come true. I remember sitting in the pew, blinking at her like it was a joke. I knew this was God telling me to let go of my school job. Not only did I get to keep working with the kids, but it was an answer to the prayer I had been praying for these specific kiddos. You can show the 4th slide now. Obviously, Oh, good. Okay, obviously life since then has been pretty great in a lot of ways. I got to marry the most patient and fun man who challenges me when I need it, but also calms me a lot when necessary, like he had to all week. I have the best job ever, and now I also get to hang out with the youth. I am currently only working 2 jobs, which is huge for me, the fewest I've ever worked in my entire life, and Kyle is here full-time as well. It's like this season is completely healing all the chaos we survived while we were dating. Every night we pray, thanking God for this season and for all of you. Sorry. While my family has definitely dealt with their fair of sadness and struggles over the past couple years, this has truly been such a special season of rest, healing, and growth. When I was asked to share my testimony, I was instantly self-conscious that I hadn't had a sad enough life or hadn't done anything grand to be impactful. I didn't feel like I had this grand magical story of faith. It's special to me, but I didn't know what it would look like on paper. But what I've learned is that redemption looks different for everybody. For me, redemption came in the form of freedom from judgment, anxiety, and guilt I felt as a child. My identity doesn't come from the deeds I do or how many jobs I have or even what other people think of me. It comes from how I love others and the joy of loving and being loved by God. It is so special to see how everything has come full circle in the relationship with the church. There was a time where church was a place of judgment for me, a place where I felt like I was always expected to fail. That's not a thing anymore. You all have healed so many layers of hurt in my heart. I sound crazy when I laugh and cry at the same time. And I will forever be grateful for all of you. It is truly an honor to get to love on your kids, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity. Seeing them every week brings me so much joy and happiness, and I'm so lucky to get to hang out with them, even when they're sassy teenagers who don't hunt eggs, which is lame. I love you so much, and I'm truly blessed to be a part of this special family.